Welcome to episode 18 of Karlene's Anime Corner. I'm very excited today to be talking about Howl's Moving Castle with Miss Amy up at the main library. And we actually recorded on location, which was a very fun and fabulous experience. You will notice a bit of difference in the sound quality because of that. The main library where we recorded is next to a rather busy road. We managed to avoid all the trains, though, that went by, so that was amazing. We had a train go by right before and right after our recording. Before we dive into our Howl's Moving Castle review, though, I decided that I would like to try and start a little new segment of this show called Karlene's Crunchyroll Q, and I am absurdly proud of the fact I got alliteration with 3 different consonants on that one. Yes, I am that nerdy. What this is I have over 100 anime in my Crunchyroll queue, and I need to start weeding them out and deciding what I want to keep watching and not keep watching. So I thought I would share with you each month an anime that I checked out that I've maybe only watched like 3 or 4 episodes of and tell you what I think of it so far. And this month, I was watching those Snow White Notes, which aired from April 2021 to June 2021, and it's based on a manga by Marimo Ragawa. This anime is about a boy named Setsu Sawamura, whose grandfather, who was a legendary shamisen player, recently died. Setsu, who's also a gifted player, sets out for Tokyo to find his sound. I'm not sure where in Japan Setsu is from. I'm going to guess Hokkaido because they always show it being snowy and cold, and that's usually how Hokkaido is portrayed in anime. But his Japanese is heavily accented enough that a couple of people in Tokyo actually ask him if he is a foreigner. I'm only 5 episodes in, and I am hooked. I never thought I would enjoy shamisen music so much. The Yoshida brothers performed the music for this anime, and I need to find more of their music for sure. The character designs are very well done and a lot more realistic than most anime, which I greatly appreciate. Setsu's older brother actually looks older and has a scruffy beard, which is wonderful. I have gotten completely wrapped up in Setsu's search for his sound, and I highly recommend this series to others, if anything, just to check out some awesome shamisen playing. And with that, let's dive into our review with Miss Amy at the main library of Howl's Moving Castle. We sound a little bit low-key in this episode. I have to confess that we both needed more coffee, and it was fairly early in the morning. Hello, and today I'm here with Amy from the main library, and we're going to be reviewing Howl's Moving Castle, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. It came out in the year 2004. And really exciting, this one is actually nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards. Unfortunately, it lost to Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which I don't have much to say on that one because I haven't actually seen Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were-Rabbit yet. But anyway, in summary, Sophie, a quiet girl working in a hat shop, finds her life thrown into turmoil when she is literally swept off her feet by a handsome but mysterious wizard named Howl. The Witch of the Waste goes ahead and turns her into a 90-year-old woman because she caught Howl's attention. On a quest to break the spell, Sophie climbs aboard Howl's magnificent moving castle and into a new life of wonder and adventure. Okay, so Miss Amy, we have not had you on the podcast before, and I am so excited because we are at the main library in downtown St. Augustine. Would you care to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. I'm the assistant branch manager at the main library. I'm also the adult services librarian. I do a lot of typical reference questions, but as assistant branch manager, I also do a lot of paperwork. I have done
Best and worst part of the job.
Exactly. Like I tell staff, if you're going to die, do it off the property so I don't have to fill out the paperwork, please.
I think that's about every job. They would prefer everything to happen away from work, so no paperwork.
But yes, and I have been doing some virtual programming during our interesting times, and so I have done a series of instructional tutorials, nowhere near as fun as what this podcast is going to be, but I do a little bit of everything for adults.
That's great. So when I approached you about being on this podcast, the first thing out of your mouth was, I want to do the Mysterious Cities of Gold.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we couldn't do Mysterious Cities of Gold because it's actually not available to watch except the DVD on your shelf, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I must have got it at the right time because when I bought it, it was still affordable, but I checked on Amazon and I was like, ooh.
No, I went looking for it a while ago after you let me watch it because I really enjoyed it too. So if any of you ever find a copy of Mysterious Cities of Gold, that is Miss Amy's #1 anime.
It is. I watch it at least like once every other year, and it's a long series, but it's really good.
Really good. But today we're going to talk about your #2 anime, because as soon as I said we couldn't do that, the next phrase out of your mouth was then Howl's Moving Castle.
Yes.
Which I was all for, because that's also one of my favorite Studio Ghibli films. Spoiler-free a little bit here. What is your spoiler-free thoughts on Howl's Moving Castle and your 5-star review?
Well, we had briefly this discussion before we started recording. For this one, we both read the book and watched the movie, which was fantastic for me because I've been wanting to read the book for a very long time. So when you said we were going to be rating it, I was like, you know what? I've got 2 different ratings. I have a before and after rating. So having just watched the film itself, as I had for several years, I would give it 5 stars. But now that I've read the book, I would move it down to 4 stars, to be completely honest. And as far as a brief spoiler-free review, well, you have our protagonist, Sophie. She works at a hat shop, and she has an encounter with a wizard. And later on, a wicked wizard comes along, or wicked witch, rather, comes along and turns her into a 90-year-old woman. And Sophie gets to go on with her journey from the perspective of a 90-year-old instead of her normal. I believe she's 18 or 19 years old in the book.
Fairly young, but old enough to definitely be on her own at times.
Yep. So she's trying to get back to normal, but she's also learning a lot about herself along the way. And again, from the perspective of a 90-year-old woman.
Yeah, and that does make it a very unique movie in some ways, because you don't often have 90-year-old women as your protagonist in a anime. It's usually the 12-year-old guy.
Exactly.
So, or the high school girl who's trying to get the love of her life.
Yes.
So, which those are fun, but it's fun to have something different now and then too.
Yes.
Howl's Moving Castle, it is one of my top favorite Miyazaki films because I had a instant love affair with this movie. I saw it pretty soon after it came out on DVD when I was in college. And I watched it, I went to bed, I had a night of I can't sleep, so I watched it again at 2 a.m. in the morning, and I don't watch movies twice in a row like that. So this was obviously one of my big Studio Ghibli films for me. And I like it for the same reasons you do, the protagonist and the fact that Sophie is a 90-year-old woman and just that interesting new viewpoint. So I have to admit, I am going to give this one 5 stars because yes, I really like the book too. I didn't like the book really the first time I read it, but as I've been reading it the second time, it's been growing on me a lot more. But I like keeping my book and movie reviews a little bit more separate if I can. Because otherwise there are movies that I would hate.
Yes.
So.
And I do have a lot of movies that I have hated because I've read the book and it was like, why did you do this to my favorite book?
Yeah, see, and I try to avoid that because there are some good movies out there that I hated because I enjoyed the book more. And I've, as an adult, I'm trying to be more grown up and go, those are 2 different things. I can't make them into one. So, and I don't feel like this movie completely betrayed the book, if that makes sense.
No, it didn't. But I felt that they didn't explain some things that were better explained within the book. And as I watched the movie after I read the book this time, I could see where I had missed out on particular things or had been confused by particular issues that were completely cleared up by the book.
Well, and that's like Howl's character, because it's like Howl is 2 different people in the movie.
Yes.
And it's because half of Howl is book Howl and half of Howl is movie Howl.
Right.
And that I agree, that does make, I kind of wish they had gone one way or the other, to be honest. Spoiler alert, I actually like the Howl in the movie a bit better. He's a nicer guy.
I have to admit that I do as also. But I feel that him as the character in the book, where he's so roguish and just, careless with people, it explains why he is the way he is in the movie.
Yeah. Okay, well, since we're already getting into some of the spoilers here and stuff, let's go ahead, and it is now spoiler alert time. If you have not seen this movie, now is a good time to go watch it before you listen to the rest, because I am not responsible for anything we tell you that you didn't want to know beforehand.
Fair.
All right. So, Miss Amy, what was your favorite moment in this movie, if you had to pick one?
Within the movie, my favorite moment is very close to the end, so I'm glad we're in the spoiler-free zone.
That's why I always make this
or the spoiler zone.
question the spoiler-free zone.
Yeah. So At the very end, when Sophie, what is it? She walks through the dark door after Calcifer has almost gone out and after the moving castle has kind of fallen apart. She goes into Howell's past and she sees the moment that his where the Calcifer comes down and is ingested by Howl, and that brief moment where as she's falling back into normal time, she's talking to him and he turns around and he hears her. Like, I still get goosebumps about that. Yeah. That one is probably my favorite scene visually and just storytelling wise in the entire movie.
So visually, some of my favorite scenes are the ones where you wind up in Howell's bedroom.
Yes.
I love all the colors, the knickknacks, this and that. And it wasn't until like the third or fourth time I watched this movie, which tells you how unobservant I am, that probably all of those weird knickknacks and spinny things and so on and so forth, they're probably all magic spells he has going.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it just didn't dawn on me. I was just like, oh, he's just... But my other thought is he keeps turning himself into a bird, a large black bird. So I was like, it's a crow's nest. Yep. He likes shiny things.
Yep, exactly. And you definitely see that in him as a person, not just as a crow, where he likes shiny things. He likes the baubles. He likes the pretty stuff.
He likes being flamboyant and out there. He's definitely the extrovert of wizards.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit about how Howl is a different person in the book versus the movie. So book Howl is definitely... appears way more shallow than in the movie. He doesn't really seem to care about the war. He doesn't really seem to care about anything other than his personal grooming, personal ability to go and woo every woman he can find with his guitar and fancy jackets. How do you think that the transference of that Howl to this movie worked and didn't work?
Well, I think they definitely captured his flamboyancy, as you mentioned, and his extrovertism. But I think they failed in the translation from the book to the movie about the why, or more of rather how he has been so careless with all of his different relationships. How the second that he, finally gets somebody's interest, he just drops them cold. And it's over and over and over again because the characters in the book are constantly commenting on what a heartbreaker he is. Which is
that phrase, he eats women's hearts.
Yes.
And the movie comes from is that he consumes them by flirting with them, getting them to fall in love, and then leaving them behind.
Yes. But it's not as obvious in the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of guess he's that kind of person, but in the book, it really spells it out. And it makes sense at the end when you find out that his heart in Calcifer has his heart. I mean, everything makes sense then.
Yeah, because he literally has no heart. He can't truly fall in love.
Right.
Yeah. The one spot where I really saw the very vain and, very bookish Howl is the scene where he gets super depressed because Sophie messed with his hair dye.
Yes.
And I was like, this does not feel like the Howl we have seen in the rest of this movie somehow. But that is very much book Howl.
Yes.
Where he just turns into a pile of melting slime because his hair is now the wrong color and he's so ugly. Nobody will ever love him again.
Right? I was reading some other reviews the other day, and one reviewer had mentioned how the tantrum scene is her absolute favorite scene. And I'm like, yes, I know the one you're talking about. That's a full-on tantrum.
Because he's just having a tantrum. And I love Sophie's just practical, well, let's take care of this.
Yep.
And after she goes outside and she has her little moment. Yes. Of, how can he be this depressed about this? It's not that important. And he's like, and then she gets a grip and she's like, okay, let's go in. Let's take care of this, clean him up, and we'll just treat him like the child he is.
What I found interesting about that scene, though, in the book is that he was upset that his hair had been turned into a ginger color. And in the book, Sophie, when she was her normal 19 or 18-year-old self, had ginger-colored hair.
Oh, I missed that detail.
Yeah, where she is taken back that he's so he thinks that ginger is ugly. And she constantly has this theme going in her head about how...
Do you know there is actual, real-world myths about ginger-haired people that are probably playing into that?
There is, but from her perspective...
In the book, this is really interesting. In the book, Howl comes from our world. He's not part of the fantasy world he lives in.
Nope.
So he's actually from Wales.
Which has a lot of ginger-haired... No, I'm
they're
thinking...
more black-haired.
Yeah, you're right.
They're more black-haired, if I remember right. Ginger is more the Irish.
Yeah.
So...
But yeah, so I thought that little detail where he was he went into a tantrum because his hair color was essentially the same hair color as Sophie's was, where I found that really revealing about her as well and how she responded to that.
Now, the other thing they did in the book that they didn't do in the movie that I really loved was the fact that Sophie herself was actually, they called it out, she was a witch with a lot of power.
Yes.
And in the movie, they kind of imply that she has some kind of power because she, in essence, breaks her own curse. Still not quite sure how she did it, but she did it. But in the book, I love the fact she's, the term I've heard in other fantasy books is Stitch Witch.
Yep.
Where when she sews things and talks to them, she actually puts spells into clothing and hats and stuff like that.
Yep.
And I wish they had shown some of that in the movie.
Exactly.
Because that I thought was really cool, that she was actually, untrained though she was a witch with a lot of power. And so I thought that was really cool, the way they set that up in the book. And I was like, that would have been neat in the movie. Because in the movie, it's just like, well, because of the power of love, Sophie can do these things.
Right.
They don't show her as having a
personal power. And one of the things that struck me as I was watching the movie after having read the book, it reminded me a lot, the treatment at least, sort of The Great Gatsby, where the book, The Great Gatsby, is really about Nick. It's not really about Gatsby, which was kind of how the book felt here, where it was Howl's Moving Castle, but the book was really about Sophie. But when you watch the movie, it's all about Howl. Yep.
Yeah. But, yeah, in every movie that I've seen with Great Gatsby, it's all about Gatsby and his parties and his life and his everything. So, yeah, I agree. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but you're right. Shall we talk about our favorite character? Calcifer.
Yes.
Calcifer, as voiced by the
Billy Crystal. Oh, so good.
May all your bacon burn. Yes. Best curse ever, and I'm very glad it's in the book as well as the movie.
Yeah.
So I have only ever watched this movie in English, which is probably a failing on my part because I'm the anime person. I should watch everything in Japanese.
Yep.
But I just love Calcifer's voice so much and the way they animate him and everything. In the book, he's more demon.
Fire demon.
They occasionally have him show up as more of a demon in the movie too. For instance, when he's moving the castle and stuff like that. But in the book, he's always apparently a demon shape with the hair and everything like that.
Yep.
But I love the way they did him in Miyazaki's film. Just this ball of fire, and he's just very sarcastic at times. I love that. And just like,
he's a good little side character.
He is. He has, and I love the fact that you find out that he actually is Howl's heart.
Yes.
So, and because Howl keeps talking about how he and Lucifer are tied, but you never really understand it until the Witch of the Waste goes, oh, that's his heart.
Yeah.
Oh, Witch of the Waste. That's a whole nother conversation about her in the movie.
Yep.
So I love the way they animate her.
Yep. She reminded very much of, what is it, from The Little Mermaid?
Ursula.
Yes, Ursula. Yes. She definitely had Ursula vibes.
She did. She definitely had that. And when she becomes old at the end, I love the fact that they kind of mellowed her a little bit, but they didn't mellow her love and her passion because she was still willing to burn to death to take Howl's heart.
Yeah.
So it's like, when you get old, certain things do kind of mellow out, but certain things don't. And I like the fact they showed that with her.
Yeah.
Suleiman the Wizard.
That entire character,
I still can't decide. Somebody said, I was reading something online, and like, she's not really a bad guy. And I was like, yeah, I don't know.
No, she's a bad guy in the movie.
She's a bad guy.
In the movie.
In the movie. Well, the book is a completely
different character.
Well, they're two different characters.
But they were
Howl's teacher, Miss. I can't remember her name.
Yeah,
I didn't write it down, and it's a long one.
But it was they changed it from mentor to villain. I mean, that's essentially what it was.
Well, and it sounded like originally it was mentor, but when Howl started doing things she didn't approve of, it became villain.
But her character itself, I mean, she was doing things that nobody else would approve of.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder because Howl mentioned that the wizard in the movie, the wizards were turning themselves into creatures to fight.
Right.
And he was like, they can't turn themselves back. I wonder how much Suleiman was involved in that and getting them to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that just does not. You see how easily she ends the war at the end. She could have kept this from happening all around, and I'm just like, she's not a good person.
No, she really isn't.
And I can't find a way to argue that she is. I love the fact that her dog even turned on her at one point and decided Sophie was a better person than her.
And the dog, that was a completely different...
I love him in the movie.
Yes.
Just that, and I don't know who does his little coughs and stuff, but they did a great job.
Yeah, he's adorable. But also, he was another character from the book that was completely different. In the book, he was a conglomeration of, well, he was Percival, the prince, and there was like a third party or another third person, Ben Sullivan, the missing wizard in the book. And they were all, pieces of them had all been combined into this bespelled character who would switch back and forth from human form to dog form.
Yeah.
And he was sent over to kind of watch over Sophie from her sister. That was the other thing I really didn't like about the translation from book to movie. They kind of cut the sisters out, the whole family angle.
I can kind of see that a little bit, though, because it's already a 2-hour movie.
Yes, that
How
is.
much, if you add in all the sisters' storylines, it starts getting complicated. I do love the fact that when her mother comes to see her the second time,
yes,
they managed to give you a whole story with like one sentence.
True.
Because she gets in and she says, "Now take me to my husband," and it's the Suleiman's page. And you instantly know from that statement that what she did was not under her own volition, that her husband is being held captive by Suleiman and all this stuff. So it's like you get this whole story with one sentence and one character.
Yeah, they did do that very well.
I thought that was incredibly well done because it showed more of Suleiman's evilness.
Yes.
And her willingness to do whatever needed to be done to get her way.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I do wish, though, that the sisters had played a more predominant role because they really drove a lot of what Sophie did. Mm-hmm.
Well, because Sophie cares for her family a lot.
Deeply. She has a good relationship with them. I mean, even her stepmother, Fanny, even though the other sister wasn't too fond of her, you know, Sophie and Fanny, they deeply cared about each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As I said, the book and the movie, they're two
completely
different beasts.
Yep,
completely different. The movie definitely continues with Miyazaki's anti-war messages. He has a lot of those in his movies, and this one I think is more blatant than most.
Yes.
Because when you see the war scenes and stuff, it's like, it doesn't matter who's dropping the bombs. The people that are going to not have a good time are the ones on the ground.
Right.
And it really doesn't matter which side it is. And Howell, we're not sure whose ships he's always destroying because it could be either side. He doesn't care. He just wants all of the warships to be gone.
Right.
But what I like too is also Miyazaki showed that Howell, by lowering himself to the level of the battlefield, was himself becoming a monster.
Yes.
And I was like, that was like way more depth than I was expecting out of this movie. And as I said, this movie has a lot of rewatchability because of the little things like that show up.
Right. That was, and I enjoyed, after reading about how he added that to the storyline, the war part, because that was pretty much absent from the book.
Yeah, I mean, there was a war going on, but it was
background.
But it was background, and it was more like Howell just didn't want to be bothered by the king with this war, and didn't want to be tied down with responsibility.
Exactly, precisely.
Where in this case, it was more like Howell never truly grew up, I think, in the movie, because he gave his heart to Lucifer.
Yep.
So he was looking at it with a child's eyes, which maybe wouldn't be a bad thing sometimes, where it was like, you are hurting people and you need to stop.
Yeah.
So he did what he could.
Yep.
Which might not have been the best way to do it. I personally would have gone after Suleiman and like beat her into the ground until she made the king stop, because she obviously had that power.
Yes, she did not treat the king with a lot of respect.
No, and to be honest, the little bit we saw of him, I wouldn't have
either.
either.
No, exactly. Yeah, definitely sort of a puppet character in the movie.
Yeah, with that big mustache and everything.
Yeah. But I found it interesting because, as you mentioned, it was Miyazaki started writing the script around in 2003 when the Afghanistan war really started
going, and he was not a huge fan of the war. I don't think he's a huge fan of war, period.
No.
Let's put it that way. Because even the one film he did that is set during World War II, The Wind Rises, war is pretty much not seen at all. He focuses on the love of aircraft and flying, which if you watch a lot of his movies, there's always planes someplace, and they're always fantastically designed.
Yep.
And a lot of fun. And he focused on the relationship of the character, which the movie is semi-biographical, not truly, of the man who designed the Zero fighter.
Okay.
And if you haven't seen The Wind Rises, I highly recommend it. It was amazingly well done.
I think I have seen it, but I didn't remember it.
Okay.
It's been a while.
There's an earthquake scene at the very beginning that I think is some of the best animation I've seen out of a Studio Ghibli film.
Nice.
So, and the sounds they did for it, the sound design for it was absolutely amazing. I saw it in the theater, so it was like really like amazing. But yeah, and, even with that film, Miyazaki is set during World War II. He's not focusing on the war.
Mm-hmm.
That's not his focus. His focus is the people on the ground and how the war affects them.
Precisely.
And that even with this film, that's how it goes. Castle in the Sky, that's how it goes. So, Princess Mononoke, he does the same thing. What's the one with Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind? Again, a very anti-war message. And I think Miyazaki also tends to have environmental messages. So do you remember when the enemy flyer falls into the field of flowers and just kind of destroys a section of it?
Yeah.
I saw his environmentalism coming out there, where man's machinery is destroying the natural world.
Yep.
So, but as I said, there's a lot of Miyazaki in this movie.
And what I found particularly interesting as I was reading a different article about that, and because I kind of noticed it in the film where it doesn't explicitly say World War II, it feels a little bit like World War I, but he doesn't really assign it a particular war. So anyone who has any experience with any type of war from anywhere can kind of relate to it.
It's very World War II with the bombing.
But
very World War I when you see that one scene where the earth is completely torn up and there's just armies everywhere and so on.
Yep.
And it feels like they're settled in for a very long war, stalemate, which is what World War I became.
Yep.
So, and it's just, I love the fact that he created a world that's run on steam, like with the steam cars and everything like that. But you go out into the countryside and you still have the horses pulling the giant hay carts and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I love the world he created.
And one of the things that somebody mentioned in an article is that Miyazaki's fans sometimes refer to his film's settings as never when. And I was like, that's perfect. That describes it perfectly.
There are very few of his movies that have a definite time period or space in time. I mean, Spirited Away technically is modern, but she spends most of it in the bathhouse as timeless.
Right.
There is no modern versus ancient. Princess Mononoke does have a set time period in Japanese history, but it's got enough mythical and magic to it that at times you feel that it's older than it is.
Yep.
So I like that, the never when. And this is truly a really good example of that in Howl's Moving Castle.
Yep. It definitely has that steampunk feel, but you don't know exactly what period they're referring to.
Yeah, and even with the steampunk feel, it's because of the magic. I think they're able to do even more than you would normally see in a steampunk.
Yep.
Real quick question, and probably the last one we have time to discuss, but did you notice throughout the movie Sophie seems to grow older and younger?
Yes.
Depending on her emotions?
It was partially her emotions, but as we learned in the book, it was because Howl was fully aware that she was under a spell, and he was trying to break the spell.
That was my next question is, when in the movie do you think Howl became aware that Sophie was not who Sophie was?
There is a moment, I don't remember, it was like maybe her second or third day there, where he comes home and she's sleeping behind a curtain, and he kind of
looks in and it's young Sophie.
Yes, I think that might be the moment.
I have watched this multiple times, and I was still trying to figure out, does he actually see her as young Sophie, or is Miyazaki just giving that to us to remind us that Sophie is still young?
My perception was that it was how Howl saw her.
Okay, because I keep flipping back and forth on that one. But you're right. It's after that he does begin to treat Sophie a little differently. Yes. Because Suleiman recognizes that Howl is in love with Sophie, and Sophie is definitely in old woman phase at that time.
Exactly.
So, and I somehow don't see Howl falling in love with a
90-year-old woman. No.
So he had to know at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
To be honest, when I first watched this movie, that's one of the things that confused me the most, because Sophie's age seemed to flip back and forth so constantly. And at the very end, it's like nobody actually broke the spell on her, but she's young again. I couldn't figure that one out. But she keeps her gray hair. Yeah.
I think he called it like
starlight.
Yes, exactly. So. Exactly. But, yeah, that is interesting, because I don't think it's addressed in the book either, exactly what the spell was and how it was broken.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where I wonder if she had the power to break it all the time. Yep. And she just had to, I don't know, somehow want to be her younger self truly again.
In the book, there was a part where Howell mentions that he was aware of the spell and he's been trying to break it all this time. And he was like, it got to the point where I think that you wanted to be a 90-year-old woman. And
well, and that's it. And Sophie, at one point, I think this was in the book, because now I'm confusing book and movie. She makes some comment how, as a 90-year-old woman, she can say what she thinks.
Precisely.
And she can be things that she couldn't be as the 19-year-old girl working in a hat shop. Because,
exactly.
I mean, the 19-year-old Sophie would not have walked into a king's palace and embraced him the way she does in the book.
And that's partly why I really like the movie, I think, now that I'm looking back on it, is because the second she became a 90-year-old, she was almost fearless. Like, she was like, screw it, I can do whatever I want to now.
She takes off walking into the waste. She's like, well, there's nothing here for me. Let's go.
Exactly.
And it's just, and I appreciated that, and man, I hope I'm as spry as her at
Precisely, right?
The way she cleans that castle, I'm like, I don't have the energy to clean that way now.
No, it's like anything that had been holding her back, any perceptions, any of that just, went away.
Well, for example, at the beginning of the movie, when the Witch of the Waste shows up at the hat shop, she tries to be firm with her and like tell her, we're closed, you have to leave. But you get the feeling that she's completely overwhelmed by the witch. This is not working.
Right.
On the stairs, when they're walking up to the castle.
Yes.
I get and they're doing that sniping back and forth at each other. She is giving as good as she gets and not backing down, because she's 90 years old.
Exactly.
What can this witch do to her?
Exactly. And there's sort of a good metaphor there where, when you've sort of hit rock bottom, the only place you have back, to go is back up. Yeah. And her outlook, I found really refreshing in the movie, where she was a good character who would just do what needed to get done, and she wasn't worried how other people saw her.
Well, and as Calcifer says, if anybody was going to throw water on me and I'd survive, it would be you, because she keeps doing the impossible that she shouldn't be able to do. Yep. And I guess that's part of what I really like about Sophie, whether she's 90 or young at the end. It's that she keeps going forward and she keeps trying to do the impossible.
Yep. So. And she does it well.
And in the end, she gets Howell, she gets the moving castle, and they're striding off into the sunset.
I did want to mention really quick what I also loved about the castle itself. In the movie, Miyazaki added the chicken legs from Baba Yaga's hut.
Yes, and it's more organic looking. It's got a mouth, it's got eyes, it's got all this hodgepodge of stuff. Because I was reading the description of the castle in the book, and I was like, that's kind of boring.
Yeah, exactly. I was expecting a little bit more.
He gives it that more.
He does.
The chicken legs definitely are probably Baba Yaga inspired.
Yeah, I got really excited when I saw those. I was like, he knows his mythology.
He does, and he knows his European mythology, too. Because I think that's why he sets so much stuff in Europe, is because he just likes the look of it.
Yep.
Well, we are reaching the end of our time. Do you have any last thoughts or comments about this movie or the book?
Yes. As I was reading the book this time and rewatching the movie, I have a book recommendation for your older listeners, probably more on the 16 and older spectrum. If they really enjoyed this sort of setup where you have a vain male character who really, that's all he's truly concerned about, and a female protagonist who's just sort of in the background rolling her eyes going, oh my goodness. There is a great series by Myra Moore. The first one in the series is called Resenting the Hero, which is a great title for a book. I
love that title.
But it's a fantasy series about, they're sort of paired up for work, a job that they have to get done. And he is definitely the Howell type, and she is definitely the Sophie type. And it's just great adventures, and the interpersonal dynamics are just spot on perfect. But beyond that, as far as any other things I wanted to mention about the movie, I still love the movie. The book is good, but I do still love the movie, and I'll definitely be watching it again.
I think it's one of Miyazaki's better examples of storytelling.
Yes.
As I said, there are moments where you're left to kind of wonder how things happened, but there's also things like that whole one-sentence complete story he manages to put in there.
Or even sometimes the shots where he stages where there's no dialogue, there's nothing going on, there's just that moment of silence where a character is looking off into the distance. That tells a story even without any words.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that is one thing I have noticed about Japanese movies versus American ones. They're not afraid of a moment of silence.
And that's important.
Now, it has to be well used, which I think Miyazaki definitely does in this film. But they're not afraid to cut out the music, cut out everything, and just have that silence.
Exactly.
And our movies are music from end to end.
Yeah.
There's never any,
Nope.
even when they're having silent staring moments, there's little violins in the background or something.
Yep.
So that is one thing I have noticed that is a difference between, I think probably culturally or something, I'm not sure. I do not have a film degree. I just watch a lot of movies for fun.
Ditto.
My background is classical archaeology. This is definitely far away from the Greeks and the Romans. But, well, Miss Amy, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me about Howl's Moving Castle. And I definitely had this on my list of movies to do some point because it is one of my favorites.
Yes. Well, thank you for inviting me. Even though this wasn't Mysterious Cities of Gold, I still had a good time.
I'm glad. And as I said, if any of my listeners can find The Mysterious Cities of Gold, it definitely is really well done. It's a South American adventure, which is very hard to find in an anime. Mm-hmm. And I'm not 100% sure on this, but I probably should have looked it up beforehand. I think it's actually a co-production with a French company.
I believe so. That rings a bell.
And they came out with a sequel a few years ago.
Yeah, I haven't watched it because I'm scared.
I can't. Well, I also couldn't find it. So I
too.
found a French copy, but it won't play in the U.S.
No, wrong region. Yeah.
Yeah, wrong region. Region coding, the bane of anime viewers. But anyway, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll have you on again for another show. So it'll be fun.
Absolutely. I'll just have to start thinking of other movies now.
Yeah. Or I can just randomly assign you one.
I don't know if that will end well.
I am not that evil. Why do people keep looking at me like I'm going to give them something horrible? I'm only evil to Keith.
Well, he deserves it too.
Yes, he does. Anyway, well, and again, thanks. This is probably my third time thanking you, so we just need to hit stop on the recording.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for joining Amy and I on our review of Howl's Moving Castle. Just a few little afterwords here. This movie is available streaming through HBO Max. I believe they are the first streaming service to ever get the Studio Ghibli movies. It is also easily to find at our library system. We have several copies checked in if you're interested in watching it and live in this area. If you don't live here, check out your own public library. There's a good chance they might have it. It's a fairly well-known film. I also, before recording this episode, actually looked up to see how you pronounce Studio Ghibli. And it is, according to Google, pronounced Studio Ghibli, not Ghibli. And I will probably forget this by the next time I watch another Studio Ghibli film. So I will have to look it up again. But technically it is with the soft G and not the hard G. Also, if while hearing us discuss the book, Howl's Moving Castle, if you're interested in other books by the same author, I do highly recommend The Dark Lord of Dirkholm. That's one of my favorite Diana Wynne Jones books, and I have read it multiple times. It has griffins in it. I have a soft spot for griffins. And with that, I'm going to bring this episode to a close. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great month with lots of time to watch a lot of anime. Goodbye!